Today's episode of the Star Local Media High School Sports Podcast is brought to you by Baylor Scott & White Sports Performance Center, athletes made here. The Sports Performance Center was developed with one goal in mind: to maximize human performance through movement and recovery. Their team of expert performance sports coaches and trainers will guide you to achieve your performance goals. That's the Baylor Scott & White Sports Performance Center, located at the Star in Frisco. This episode is also brought to you by Allen Dental Studio. Located off Bethany Drive in Allen, their office was designed with you, the patient, in mind, which means an excellent and enjoyable experience. From cosmetics to implants, you deserve a perfect smile, and Allen Dental Studio can make that happen. Also, don't want to leave out another longtime friend of the podcast, Texan Senior Residential Care Homes. With locations in Carrollton and Dallas, Texan Senior Residential Care Homes offers an affordable, high-quality alternative to senior living. Call now at 469-400-7650. That's Texan, spelled T-E-X-S-E-N, Texan Senior Residential Care Homes. Welcome to another episode of the Star Local Media High School Sports Podcast. My name is Matt Welch, being joined by Brian Murphy and Taylor Raglin. Gentlemen, it is week 6, so let's preview what we got on tap this week. Starting with our reader-voted game of the week. A big thank you to everybody who went to the website, starlocalmedia.com, to vote on this week's poll. And wouldn't you know it, fellas, we get to talk a little private school football. Prestonwood Christian versus Fort Worth All Saints gets the nod as our game of the week. I want to say this is actually the second time over the podcast history that we'll be previewing a game between Prestonwood and All Saints, and I think under the game of the week microscope as well. This one Friday, 7 o'clock out at Lions Stadium on the Prestonwood campus, and in a meeting between two teams that I just like the significance of this matchup just because of what these two teams kind of embody, with Prestonwood being one of the dominant private school football programs in the Dallas area, and then All Saints being just the same for Fort Worth. And you look at kind of how these programs have kind of come together over the years, like Prestonwood's been, just year in, year out, one of the most consistent things at the TAPS level. And then you had a program like All Saints, which was initially part of TAPS back in the 90s, but then in the year 2000, they joined the Southwest Preparatory Conference, where they eventually became kind of the flagship football program for that conference. I want to say they won 6 state championships during their tenure there, and it got to a point where you had, All Saints just wreck and shop over in SPC, and then you had the Prestonwoods, the Nolans, also out of Fort Worth, Bishop Dunn, Bishop Lynch, all these dominant programs in the Metroplex, basically trading the state title back and forth in TAPS. So it was kind of a nice little water cooler question of just how would a program like All Saints, as consistently dominant as they've been, how would they fare if they were back in TAPS and playing the those other programs. And then in 2017, they rejoined TAPS, and wouldn't you know, their first year back, they immediately went to the state semifinals, where they lost, ironically enough, to the very team they will line up against on Friday, Prestonwood Christian. This is the 5th time in the past 4 seasons that the Lions and the Saints have met. Like I said, PCA got the better of them in that state semifinal back in 2017. An absolute shootout, 55-48. I mean, both those teams had some prolific offensive talent. All Saints had a bit of a down year last year, though. They only won 2 games, but have since rebounded. They've already exceeded that win total, and they already have a signature victory under their belt, and that came in defeating Parish Episcopal 24-17, a Parish team that had just come off a win over Trinity Christian Cedar Hill, which we've talked about plenty on the podcast as part of the TAPS Division II classification, and them being, arguably the best private school team in the state, at least entering the season. But so yeah, that kind of, that tells you all you need to know about as far as kind of where All Saints has come from what they had last year. However, it was in that game against Parish where kind of the big subplot now heading into this game emerged, and that was in that victory they did lose quarterback Hamp Fay to an injury. Fay missed their game last week against Bishop Dunn, a 14-2 loss. So obviously his absence was very much felt. And Taylor, as you've been looking up for this game, obviously that very much looms large heading into this one, given Fay's importance to what All Saints has.
Yeah, to me, it's just like it's one of those questions of, even if he comes back, certainly even if he's at 60%, he's better than whatever they ran out last week in a 14-2 loss. So, odds are maybe you see him, but how effective is he going to be? Because, Prestonwood rolled down to Houston, took down St. Pius in a weird game of its own. I mean, 12-0. 12-0, and it wasn't all field goals. It was 2 missed extra points, I think, for Prestonwood to get to 12. So, it's tempting to, I took Prestonwood. I guess I'll just get that out of the way. It's tempting to want to pick All Saints just because that Parish win does look so good. I know the offensive line there is legit. I'm sure you'll get into that more in a second. But yeah, to me, it just comes down to the fact that Hamp Faye's clearly, the thing that drives the bus over there. And if he's out, then I don't give them much of a chance at all as far as, being able to beat Prestonwood. Crazier things have happened, especially if Prestonwood has another down offensive performance. I mean, St. Pius is no slouch either, but that's a strange 12-0 offensive performance. But, if Hamfe's in there and he's 100%, say the injury, cleared up and it wasn't that serious and things worked out, then I could really come to regret taking the Lions.
Because when Hamp Faye is in the lineup, it's a different ball game for them as far as what he brings to the table. He's completed over 70% of his passes on the season for 845 yards and 10 touchdowns, just to 1 interception. And again, they are 3-1, and he missed one of those games. So that tells you right there just how effective he is when he has been in the lineup. And whether or not he plays or not, even if he does play, but in a depreciated capacity, it might not matter because, as you alluded to, Taylor, they have one of the best, maybe the best offensive line that you'll find at the private school level, and it all starts with the Brockermeyer twins of Tommy and James. Tommy Brockermeyer, they're both just juniors. Tommy, though, is the #1 prospect in Texas per 24/7 Sports for the 2021 class. I mean, offers from everywhere. However, obviously, recruiting outlets seem to be thinking that he will lean towards Texas, giving his family's ties to the school. Got a dad that played there, has a brother that's currently on the roster. And yes, a 5-star, the #1 prospect in Texas. I cannot reiterate that enough. The #1 prospect in Texas, and at the private school level, that is a massive, massive difference maker. Even more so than just if he were playing for a UIL program, just because the talent can be a little bit more imbalanced at the private school level. And his brother James, no slouch either, only a 4-star.
I know, poor guy.
Still, I mean, he's the #3 ranked center in the state for the class of 2021. He's got offers from Texas, OU, LSU, Michigan. Yeah, he's amazing too.
It's a rough break to be a 4-star and be the second best athlete to your twin. That's a rough break. I mean, I'm sure they're both doing fine, but
they'll be okay when they're both blocking alongside each other at Texas.
That's a tough one.
So yeah, you look at just what kind of an advantage that All Saints has. Just from the get-go. We've talked ad nauseum on the podcast about just as far as an intangible in any matchup. If you're automatically guaranteed to have a leg up in the trenches, how much that can dictate the outcome of a football game, and whether or not Hamp Faye plays, whether or not he's at 100%. That alone is going to give All Saints a fighting chance, regardless of who they line up against, because you have two of the absolute best linemen in the state on the same line. And then you have a guy like Jacob Matlock, who is their kind of their go-to running back as well as receiver. He's just as involved in the receiving game as he is in the run game on the season. Let's see, he has 240 yards rushing, 232 receiving. There are games like against Parish where he had 11 carries and 12 receptions. So yes, he's a he's
like an Alvin Kamara stat line.
Very much, yeah. So you got to be mindful of him. And then you have guys like Mitch Bothwell, Peyton Kramer, who are some other notable wide receivers for them. Defensively, they are led by Cayman Lane, who doubles as their top pass rusher. He's got 7 tackles for loss, 4 sacks. That pass rush period has been very impressive with 13.5 sacks across just 4 games. Other guys to watch for on that side of the ball are Andrew Bettle, Tony Lacey. If you just need an idea as to what All Saints is capable of on defense, again, we mentioned that win over Parish. Parish is led by one of the top quarterbacks in the state in Preston Stone. They held him to 8 of 19 passing for 134 yards. So All Saints definitely has a gear on defense that is going to be interesting against a Prestonwood offense that has been a little bit more variance to that Prestonwood offense than usual. Prestonwood is usually a program that you associate with being among the area leaders, and just about every offensive category. And, you look at, they scored 13 points in their opener against Wiley, scored 12 last week against St. Pius, as you mentioned. But then they have games when they scored 44 against TCA, albeit, TCA is a little down. They had 42 against Argyle-Liberty Christian, but only 6 of those points came in the first half. So, this offense can be a little bit trick or treat, and that's, that can make a matchup against a potentially elite defense like All Saints a bit of a white knuckle ride, considering you might not know what you're getting. But nevertheless, you look at how Prestonwood's got to this point. Jacob Switzer, the grandson of famed coach Barry Switzer, he's he's in his first year as Prestonwood's starting quarterback, completed almost 60% of his passes for 780 yards, 6 touchdowns to 5 interceptions. He is also heavily involved in the run game. He has 62 carries on the season, just 4 fewer than their lead running back, Randall Holmes. Holmes has had a great year. His first year as Prestonwood's go-to running back. Has 434 yards, 2 touchdowns. Switzer has 6 rushing touchdowns, so be leery of that when Prestonwood gets closer to the goal line. They've also got a guy like Timothy Taylor, who was their leading rusher last year as another option on the run game. He was initially at Frisco Reedy, then transferred back to PCA. Been a little bit slower to get going this year. He averaged 5.5 yards per carry, but only 2.9 this season. But obviously, he's got plenty of years in that Prestonwood system and has got a track record to suggest that he can right the ship in no time. Like I said, it's largely a run-based offense. They don't throw the ball a ton, but when they do, they make it count. Switzer's averaging, about 13 yards per completion. Guys like Riley Wilson, Nate Stafford, averaging both 13.5 yards per catch. They got a pretty stout O-line in their own right, led by Navy commit Javan Bouton. But it's been I think above all else for this Prestonwood team, it's been that defense that has really stood out early in the season. This was a unit that had a ton of question marks, lost a lot of talent to graduation, a lot of talent is off playing, Division I college football. But when you look at, they held Wiley, which, you're thinking of what Wiley's done since then. Wiley might win the district championship in 10-6A. PCA held them to 6 points. They held TCA to 7 points. They shut out St. Pius. Overall, just 15 points per game allowed. And it all kind of starts up front with that with the defensive line. I was talking with head coach Chris Cunningham back when they squeaked out that win over Wiley, and for just a public school offensive line versus a private school defensive line, Prestonwood owned them, according to Cunningham. And guys like Dylan Jackson, Aiden Combest were just, they were living in the backfield against the Pirates. Then you have guys like Graham Hill, Riley Wilson, who Wilson I mentioned earlier is their leading receiver. He doubles as their second leading tackler and is tied for the team lead in the interceptions with 2. So yeah, he does everything. And then guys like Walker Lunsford. They got some talent all over on defense. It's a defense that's very new, very young, but they're starting to really come together and, kind of just working part and parcel with what PCA usually has on that side of the ball. And it's going to be in the trenches where I'm fascinated to see how Friday's matchup pans out, because as we mentioned, this is probably the stiffest test they'll face.
Yeah. And I see it, man, it's so hard to predict. I'm glad I don't have to put points on this game, because I could see it going, especially if Hamp doesn't play, I could see it being another case of 14-6, 12-8, something really dumb, just because the defenses are both so good. Prestonwood offense has had its ups and downs, and like you mentioned, is going up against a really stout defense. Like you said, you don't want to take away anything from Wiley, but All Saints has proven that unit is for real. So, I could see another low-scoring game, decided by a single score, nobody breaks 20, or, maybe Hamp plays and it's just a track meet because the defenses are going to get worn out and the Prestonwood offense is rolling and running the ball over the place and throwing it around, and then it's, 42-35 or something dumb. It's really tough to pick, especially these private school games sometimes, and when you don't know, who's going to be on the field as far as injury goes. But if I had to put money on it, I would imagine another kind of low-scoring dogfight, defensive struggle with Hamp's availability and effectiveness, if he is available, kind of being the difference.
He's already graduated from having a first and a last name.
He's just Hamp.
That's
a great name. I have to just say it. He's a great name. How can you not?
I was, I'll admit, I was a little surprised at how the picket line ultimately ended up swaying on this game, just considering that if All Saints is at full strength, you could argue that they're the favorite in this matchup, just given what that team has already accomplished when at full strength. Like I said, there was a minute where, again, when Parrish took down Cedar Hill, they're thinking, wow, that might be the best private school team in the state. And then they turn around right around and lose to All Saints.
Yeah.
But yeah, I picked Prestonwood as well, and ultimately it's the Hamp question.
Yeah.
Is like, again, without knowing for sure that he's going to play, I mean, it's too much of a variable
It's also a little bit of a devil I think thing for us. I mean, a lot of the times, we don't cover Prestonwood on a week-to-week basis. Even you, I don't know if you've seen him this year.
No, it's been my first time.
So it's tempting sometimes to go with we know what Prestonwood has, we know how good they've been, and none of us have seen All Saints. None of us have really in depth looked at All Saints. I mean, the injury thing is obviously the biggest factor, but I think sometimes we do get a little a little coverage area biased maybe. So it's a little surprising to me too that it was a clean sweep.
Yeah, this one was a 5-0 sweep for Prestonwood over All Saints. We'll see if that's how it pans out on Friday. Once again, that is our game of the week. Prestonwood versus Fort Worth All Saints. This one Friday, 7:00 out at Lions Stadium at Prestonwood. Today's podcast is brought to you by Star Local Media. 14 newspapers and websites with a print distribution of 270,000 homes and monthly page views of 600,000 online. Star Local Media, your community voice for news. And now, let's get back to the podcast. We are at a Prestonwood Christian Academy talking with offensive lineman, also standout nose guard for Prestonwood Christian, Javan Bouton, committed to Navy, correct? This is a preview for Game of the Week. Prestonwood Christian versus Fort Worth All Saints, Friday, 7:00 right here at Prestonwood. Javan, congratulations on a strong start to the season. It's a bit of a new team, bit of a young team. So just kind of talk a bit about, you guys are 4-1 heading into this big game against All Saints. Just kind of how are you feeling so far about the hot start for the Lions?
I'm feeling confident. I think we should be 5-0. We had a close one, kind of blew a lead back then, but blowing that lead kind of built our team, built it together and made us bond and made us focus hard on practice and stuff. And this team is really tight. I'm thinking back to 2 weeks ago when we were down against Liberty.
Yeah.
And we came out that second half really strong. The offense was clicking, special teams was clicking, defense was clicking. And even though our team is young, our team plays with a lot of energy and a lot of fight. So we might be down, but we're never out.
Now, you guys have done a little bit more traveling than usual for this non-district schedule. You got to take the trip to Atlanta. We're down in Houston last week. What's it been like getting to see a little bit of play football, I guess, outside of the Metroplex a bit?
It's been interesting to see how, Dallas football is compared to everything else, Houston football. And I mean, Houston football is dominant too because it's in the Texas region, and football is king in Texas. And going to Atlanta and just going against all those big boys from Georgia and comparing them against Texas was a great experience too.
Now, I know you guys just finished coming back from a 12-0 victory against St. Pius. I mean, I think of the last couple of years when you've seen St. Pius in these these Big 12 style shootouts, and then you win a game 12-0, and Coach was telling me that I guess the field conditions were all sorts of chaotic. What was it like kind of being in that atmosphere?
It was just a slug it out game, just good old classic 1970s football, back in the old days, just run and pound, ground and pound all day. The passing game was the conditions, the mud, it didn't allow for a passing game, so you just had to depend on the line, depend on the running backs to hit the holes. It's a great experience. Your
style of game, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, now you've been with this program for quite a bit. Now, like I said, there's a lot of turnover from last year. You're one of the few returning starters on this team. What has it kind of been like having to kind of, I guess, take a lot of the younger guys under your wing and kind of, I guess, operate a much different team than what Prestonwood's had in recent years?
It's been good because there's a whole lot of new energy now that a lot of people that haven't played are playing now. So they're really excited for the opportunity, and they're giving 100% effort in practice and just dedication to the thing, just doing cryotherapy and recovery and just making sure they're on time for practice, eating right, hydrating for the games. So the new energy burst has been it's been a good effect to our team.
Now, you've been one of the program's top offensive linemen for a while. Just talk a bit about, I guess, that specific position. Just kind of how has your game as a lineman evolved, I guess, from last season? Where do you feel like you've kind of grown?
Last season, I felt like I was just one of the best in TAFs at pass blocking, but then I just wanted to be more dominant, so I focus on run blocking, and I'm committed to Navy, and running is what they do down there, so I just focus on run blocking, just dominating my guy every time. And I used to take plays off kind of when it wasn't my side, but now I'm just pure dominant. And I've just been working on my footwork every day, doing jump rope, bench press, and just training all summer.
And Coach was saying you've also got involved on the defensive line as well. What has that transition been like, playing both sides of the ball?
It's been great because as a defensive lineman, kind of see both sides of the ball, and it works on my footwork too. Like, it makes me faster off the ball, and it works on my conditioning too. Like, because I have to focus on offense and defense, so I can't just be 1-minded set, go to the sideline, take a break. Like, I have to be in the game always.
Now, had you played any D-line at all prior in your high school career?
No.
All right, so I guess all right, so then looking ahead now to Friday's matchup. I mean, you have an All-Saints team that's much improved from what you guys saw last year. They got some talent up front as well. So what do you kind of know about All-Saints, and how are you feeling heading into that matchup?
I know that they have really good linemen, Brockemeyer twins, the brothers. I mean, they're really good. I know that they have some good D linemen, good defense, and they run like a crazy defense, kind of like the blitzes and the stunts are like really out there. I know that they're way better than they were last year. Last year they were a rebuilding team, but this year they've proven like they can beat teams. Like 2 weeks ago they beat Parrish, and they had a close one with Dunn. So like this will be a good matchup for us to see where we're at too.
And this is going to be y'all's 6th game. You finally get the district schedule started next week. How anxious is the team just for district to finally be here after this week?
We're anxious. We kind of started this term like a revenge tour we're on, because last year we started off like 8-0, and then we lost to Bishop Lynch and Bishop Dunn back to back. So like we're just kind of like trying to retake over the district from when we won state in 2017.
Awesome. Well, hey, Javan, that is all I had for you, man. Once again, this has been Javan Bouton, offensive lineman plus defensive lineman this year with Prestonwood Christian. They host Fort Worth All Saints on Friday out here at Lions Stadium in our game of the week. Should be a fun one, Javan. Thank you for taking the time to chat.
Thank you.
Still got 4 more games to talk about that were also up for consideration for game of the week. So let's look at a few of those marquee matchups. We were just talking, gentlemen. Hebron at Coppell, Friday, 7 o'clock at Buddy Eccles Field. There wasn't a whole lot to glean from that first week of 6-6A, other than Flower Mound still being really, really nice at coming back and getting nice dramatic wins over Louisville. But we get the action ramps up a little bit more this week. Hebron versus Coppell, two teams that made the playoffs last year. Both made very short work of their opening district opponents. Coppell steamrolled Irving MacArthur 42-6. Hebron beat up on Irving Nimitz 58-12, I should say. And yeah, I guess as far as kind of where we're leaning on this game, you have Coppell, which nearly shocked Allen back in week 3, albeit an Allen team that was missing its starting quarterback, Raglin Sharp,
and turned the ball over a million times.
That did, but that's credit to Coppell for generating those turnovers. Coppell's had a pretty stingy defense to start the year and whatnot. They do have quarterback Kevin Schumann back. He was big in that performance against MacArthur. He had been out for their previous couple games, and with him in there, it's a whole new ball game. And whether or not it's enough to really make the Hawks sweat, I personally I picked Hebron to win the district championship, so that should be a hint as to where I'm leaning on this. I'm not about to turn my back on my district title pick this early. I ended up going with Hebron to win. Again, we're still kind of waiting for that big breakout performance, and I know 58 points against Irving Nimitz is 58's a nice number, but got to factor in the opponent. Still want to see him do it against a playoff caliber opponent, and this could be the matchup to do it. Time will tell, though.
It's a weird. There's nothing gleaned not only from the first week and them both kicking the crap out of an Irving school, but from the whole season thus far. They both had some really weird head scratchers.
What do you mean, Taylor?
Because Coppell almost beats Allen without Raglin Sharp, but barely got by LD Bell, like 17-10.
They had to scrape and claw.
Hebron loses 33-14 to Arlington Martin in that weird, wild game that made no sense.
I almost throw that one out there.
I do too.
That game bucked every sort of conventional trend that exists in high school football.
But then they also really haven't played anybody they weren't expected to beat. They beat Plano soundly, which everybody expected.
That's been a tricky game in the past for them.
Yeah, and then they beat Fossil Ridge. Literally the only decision point I think is, kind of like you said, I don't know. I think I had Flower Mound as the district champion with Hebron number 2, but those teams are so close. The talent level's so high. I'm really just going based on what we think of Hebron and the talent that they have. Although I do expect it to be pretty offensive. I think Kevin Schumann being back definitely helps. There's a lot of talent on both sides offensively, but I think Hebron's just got too much. I think it'll be a good one, and I think it'll be, like you said, maybe kind of finally Hebron like, okay, this is how good we are compared to potentially the 4th or 5th team maybe in our district, the postseason bubble team that we all kind of think Coppell will be. So
if this is a shootout, it would be a very stark departure from what they played last year. This was a 16-15 ball game last season, won by Coppell, I believe. Ooh. So we will see, though. However, the picket line was unanimous in this. They are riding that Hebron Hawk wave. 5-0, clean sweep for Hebron over Coppell. We'll see if Coppell makes us look like fools.
Probably. That's how it goes.
Brian, a matchup that is going to be very near and dear to your coverage later on this week. Frisco Centennial at Little Elm. Friday, 7 o'clock out at the Little Elm ISD Athletic Complex.
Stop. You didn't go to Little Elm. You went to Saxe.
Well, I'm a Little Elm homer.
Not even hiding it.
Not even trying to deny it.
I like the Lobos.
And Taylor is a Centennial alum.
Yes,
so,
I actually went there.
Yes,
so.
I will mediate this. What's sure to be a heated breakdown of this game. I don't know, Brian. You'll be covering this game on Friday. So, what is your initial lean on this game, and what do you expect?
I have no idea because Centennial almost beat the Colony last week. Mm-hmm. They had the perfect game plan for the Cougars against Miles Price and those guys. Little Elm, they're coming off a district opening loss to Lone Star. Not really indicative of.
Oh well, that's going to happen a lot.
Yeah, that was a blowout loss. Everyone's going to lose big to Lone Star. Man, this is a huge game. I mean, it's only week 2 of the district slate, but if you think about it, if you're Little Elm and you're like, okay, we still have to play the Colony and Independence, very well could be 2 losses. Centennial, you still have to play Lone Star and Independence. This is a big game. This could decide, the 4th seed. Last year this pretty much decided that as well. Pretty much eliminated Little Elm from playoff contention last year. You lose by 7 to Centennial. You start the district slate 0-2. It's kind of hard to bounce back, even though they got that win in the following week over Wakeland. But it's big. It's so early. I know it's the beginning of October, but for those bubble teams, the teams that are hovering on that 4 or 5 seed in this district, this is a must-win game for both sides.
There's just there's so much variance in what we've seen from Centennial. The same team that got shut out by Lake Dallas.
But that was a different team though, because they were kind of using different quarterbacks. They didn't really have a running back yet. They were still trying to figure that out. They might have found their running back in Javan Washington last week. Speaking with Coach Webb earlier today, they've used him, in the recent years as a nose guard, as a linebacker, and then up recently they were like, well, he did okay on JV as a running back. Let's see what he can do, and so they kind of plugged him in, and he had rushed for over 200 yards last week against the Colony. So they might have found their guy. Luckily, Little Elm is, I think, better at stopping the run than the Colony is. Maybe that's the Colony's issue right now, defensively stopping the run and running the football. Little Elm does both of those things really well. They don't throw it like the Colony does, obviously. They don't have those skill position guys, outside of Ryan Watts like the Colony has. But Little Elm, they can really run the ball, and that's going to really force Centennial to change their game plan this week versus last week. Last week, they said, hey, run the ball, please. The Colony has a freshman running back. Their offensive line is a lot less experienced than it was a year ago. And so they pretty much baited them to run the ball. You can't do that against the Little Elm because they're just going to hand it off to Jordan Hall 30 times, and he's going to rush for over 200 yards. That's their bread and butter. Coach Brown and his staff, they love running the football. So Webb and his staff, they're going to have to do something different this week if they want to beat the Lobos. Where do
you two fall on this matchup as to who wins?
Well, I think you know where I'm picking. This one actually was tough. This wasn't a no-brainer by any means. This literally was 50-50 for me. But I went Little Elm. I just think, I think they're, like I said, they're better suited to beat a team like Centennial. And granted, they almost beat the Colony last week, but there were a lot of things went their way. I don't think that's. They're still the same team that also lost. They got shut out to Lake Dallas. I really don't. I'd be shocked if Little Elm actually lost this game. That I really think about it. And I just kind of want to get in Taylor's head because he's a Centennial guy. But yeah, you obviously picked Centennial.
I went with Centennial not because I necessarily just believe that it's a sure thing. I think this game's close to a toss-up. I'm choosing to buy into the fact that maybe Centennial did figure something out against the Colony. That can have kind of a galvanizing effect on a program, even though they didn't quite get there. I mean, that's a huge appearance, especially after the Lake Dallas game and how awful they looked. That's a huge confidence builder and bounce back. And it's like, okay, we can play football. We're not just going to roll out and get smoked by 24 against a very mediocre Lake Dallas team. So I don't know. I also don't know what to really make of Little Elm yet because their losses have been, quote unquote good losses. They beat a Northwest team that then went out and laid an egg against
that maybe isn't as good as we thought they would be.
It's just all really strange, I think, on both sides. So I think it's effectively a toss-up. If Centennial really figured something out, then I could see them edging Little Elm. If one team's going to win going away, it's going to be Little Elm. So I don't know. It's close. I could absolutely see Little Elm winning the game, and I think that maybe there's a little more talent there, but I'm kind of leaning on the fact that Centennial's rolling a little bit and maybe figured something out last week.
Centennial might have found their quarterback because they've been going through a bunch of guys at quarterback. And last week they even started that a little bit. Grayson Derry starts the game, and then they put in Nathan Hopkins. Well, Nathan Hopkins got banged up. He got hurt in the second quarter of that game, and once Grayson went back in, they started moving the chains consistently again. So I think and Coach Brown, he was at that game as well because it was on a Thursday. He was able to scout. He thinks that Grayson should be that guy, and I think he should be that full-time starter. I don't think they should be going through 2 and 3 quarterbacks like they have been, like they were against Dallas. Could be a reason why they were shut out. Still trying to figure out an identity. So that bodes obviously well for Centennial, but we'll see. I mean, Little Elm's got a really stout defense. They have a really good pass rush in Tyrese Poe. If they can, the Colony wasn't really getting a lot of pressure on Grayson Derry's last week, at least from what I remember. And Tyrese Poe, he had 3 sacks in that game against Northwest at the beginning of the year. He's a stud. If he's getting in that backfield and wreaking havoc, it could be a long day offensively for Centennial, especially if they can't get the running game going like they did last week.
Yeah, it really just does boil down to how much you are buying into what they showed against the Colony, and whether or not that's a team that has in fact turned the corner and found a little something that might be sustainable versus a team that had a bit of an aberration of a performance where just some weird fluky things kind of went.
I wasn't alone.
Went their way. Yes, you were not.
Alone.
This was a very, very competitive, contentious game on the picket line. It was a 3-2, a rare 3-2. We've not had too many 3-2s on the picket line yet this season. Myself, Brian, Kendrick siding with Little Elm. Taylor, you and Devin Hassan going with the Titans out at Centennial. Let's see, got a couple Mesquite ISD matchups to round this one out over in District 11 6A. Mesquite versus Rockwall-Heath, Friday 7:30 p.m. out at Hanby Stadium. Skeeters looking to bounce back from their first loss in a very deflating one at that, as they had homecoming dashed by those dastardly Horn Jaguars, who got some revenge in the latest chapter of that rivalry. This was 35-14, a game that Horn just took control of as it went on. A really rough night for the Mesquite offense, which had just been cooking for those first few weeks. They completed less than 50% of their passes, as an offense just could not get a whole lot going from the second quarter on, it felt like. So we'll see. I mean, that's district victories in 11-6A are going to be very hard to come by, and if you're Mesquite, you cannot afford a 0-2 start, and they get a very rejuvenated Heath Hawks squad under head coach Mike Spradlin in his first year. Heath looked the part of a very improved team with 39.5 points per game on the season. They did get tripped up against McKinney North and whatnot, but it's a very dynamic passing offense behind quarterback Josh Hoover. He's thrown for over 1,600 yards and 17 touchdowns. They got 4 receivers with at least 13 catches. It's a very dynamic offense and an element that that was sorely needed for a Heath team that kind of putted its way through 11-6A last season. As far as how this one pans out, it just boils down to me not banking on 2 bad games in a row from the Mesquite offense. Simple as that. I like head coach Jeff Fleener's squad to bounce back, especially quarterback Dylan Hillard McGill, and get the win on Friday. But you guys?
Yeah, I'm similar. I think Mesquite's too good to drop 2 games in a row. I think Rockwall-Heath is certainly not. I think last week had a lot to do with Horn improving, like they're known to do. Horn's definitely found something, which we'll get to in a second, I believe. But I don't like the loss to Poteet from Tyler Lee, who then beat Heath, if that makes sense. I was playing a little schedule craziness, who beat who, but I think Heath has improved. I think there's something there for sure. You want to say they quote unquote kept pace with McKinney North. I mean, that's a really prolific offense. They lost that game, but it's a pretty good showing. But I think Mesquite's a really, really good football team that didn't show well last week, and I think they've reached the point where it's time to, after a week like that, you come out and beat the brakes off somebody else and kind of erase it.
I picked against Mesquite last week, so I decided to pick them this week. I wouldn't do that to the Skeeters.
How generous of you, Brian. Let's see. This one was a sweep in favor of the Skeeters. We all like them 5-0 to pick up their first district win Friday against Heath. And we can close this out with what should be one of the more fascinating games just in the area.
That's a good word for it.
Let's see. Mesquite Horn versus Rockwall. This one Friday 7:30 out at Wilkerson Sanders Stadium in Rockwall. A game that took on a far different look a week ago. I mean, you had everyone was getting jazzed up for Rockwall making the trip to face Longview in a meeting between two of the best teams in the Metroplex, and really kind of the signature game last week. And then really any hope of it being a competitive ball game went out the window after one series for Rockwall, as their stud wide receiver Jackson Smith and Jigba left with a shoulder injury early in that game, and Yellow Jackets never recovered, to say the least. 49-3 loss, an absolute mauling at the hands of the reigning Class 6A Division II state champions. So, and now that sets the stage for a turnaround against a Horn team, as I mentioned, was very impressive in defeating Mesquite. Their defensive line, their run game really got after the Skeeters in a big way. So now with a week for Rockwall to brace itself for life without Jackson and Jigba, he's at the very least going to miss this game on Friday. That's kind of the big question is now, what do we expect from Rockwall without their alpha and omega?
I think that it's so tough because, like you said, there's definitely something to the fact that, like, okay, we know we're going in without him. We can game plan. It's not like Braden Locke is all of a sudden not going to be able to throw a football. You can game plan differently. You can plan for other receivers to step up that are kind of in the shadow of Smith and Jigba, who's obviously just so prolific. So I don't think the Rockwall offense is just going to fall off a cliff and score 3 points again. I mean, I don't think that's happening. Longview is a special case, and losing Smith and Jigba the way they did and kind of just throwing a wrench in the entire operation is very different than, as you mentioned, having a week to game plan. At the same time, though, I think Horn's just rolling right now. I think they're finding an identity. I think they get better pretty much week to week. You saw that last year after that crazy start, and that tough non-district schedule. Same thing, this year they're battle tested. They've played really, really good football teams. They took it to Mesquite. I mean, that was no fluke last week. So I don't know. I think it's going to be a really good game. Maybe this is one where I look back and I was like, what the heck was I thinking, taking Mesquite Horn? I mean, I could see having that feeling on Friday, like, oh, of course, like, it's still Rockwall. But for now, I think I'm going to throw my weight behind Horn and its kind of upward trend, and maybe think that, Smith and Jigba being out is going to be enough to slow Rockwall and have them scrambling a little bit, either until he gets back or they have, maybe 2 weeks to really kind of figure out what their identity is without him.
I'm just kind of looking at that performance against Longview as just kind of the absolute worst case scenario. Like everything that could have gone wrong did go wrong. Obviously, you enter that game with Smith and Jigba being the centerpiece of your offensive game plan, as he is every week. So when that goes out the window after your first series, you're just kind of like
just so happen to be playing the defending state champions at Longview.
At Longview, in East Texas, where it's notoriously difficult to play. So I'm kind of throwing that result out and trusting that if there's any coach in the area that I would feel comfortable with backing with a week to prepare without his star player, it's Rodney Webb. He's one of the best offensive coaches in the state. So it is basically just a vote of confidence that, again, with a week to prepare, they're going to, it's going to be an offense that, frankly, it's kind of tough for Horn to really know what to expect because you can't really, go off of film and what you see as far as what Rockwall's going to have cooking on Friday. So, yes, even though, again, it's not just Jackson that's banged up, they're also missing their starting running back, Zach Henry, who's also a terrific player, as I can attest, seeing them last year against Allen. There is still talent, though. It's not like it was just reliant on those two. Obviously, their quarterback, Braden Locke, one of the top sophomore quarterbacks in the state. They've got a running back, Khalil Catlett, who has stepped up very nicely in place of Zach Henry. He's averaging around like 5-6 yards a carry. J.J. Williams, another big play threat at receiver. He's going to be kind of taking on the reins as far as the go-to pass catcher for them. Again, there's still too much talent there for me to just completely write them off entirely to the point where I'm picking that they're going to lose 2 games in a row. I'd be fascinated to know the last time they lost 2 games in a row, by the way. That is a Rockwall team that is consistently solid year in, year out. And again, I trust Rodney Webb's going to have them ready to beat the Jaguars on Friday. Let's see, and this was another contentious game on the picket line, another 3-2. Taylor, you and Devin Hassan siding with Horn. Brian, you, me, and Kendrick picking Rockwall. And what definitely one of the more compelling matchups that we have on the docket for this week. Let's see, as far as games that we're personally covering, what do you guys have planned this week?
Thursday, I'll be at the Star, Lone Star, in Wakeland. Hopefully, it's not a 50-point blowout. I think Wakeland can kind of hang in there a little bit, make it a game, and then Friday,
38-point blowout.
Something like that. And then Friday, I'll be at Little Elm for Little Elm and Centennial, which should be a good one.
I'm making the long the Hall up 75 to Denison for Lake Dallas and Denison. I'm going to get my eyes on Denison for the first time and hopefully a healthy Jadarian Price. It's going to be a tough one for Lake Dallas. That's a long that's a long trip to play a good, young, fast team, but we'll see. We'll be out of Munson Stadium to experience that atmosphere for the first time. So.
I will be on site for our game of the week, Prestonwood versus Fort Worth All Saints. Follow me along at Welch SLM for all of your Hamp Fay health updates.
Hamp.
Where can they follow you guys at? We haven't plugged our Twitter feeds in a bit, so.
If they want to see my press box food eats,
Brian is very big on taking pictures of his press box food.
I'm gonna have to write a column or something on that. By the end of the year, which place had the best press box.
We
food.
can't let our Frisco ISD guy write a column about press box food. I don't think we got to have.
Hey, I've been doing a good job of not
avoiding Frisco.
That's just how that's how it's gone. But I'm at Bryan Murphy _.
Mine's just my name. It's Taylor Raglin. You'll find it.
Awesome.
Believe in y'all.
And that'll do it, folks, for this episode of the podcast. We'll be back on Monday to, I think we got some sort of little mid-season theme planned for Monday's episodes. We'll see what that holds. Otherwise, folks, that'll do it for this episode. Appreciate y'all for tagging along. Thanks for watching. We will talk to y'all later.